Hello everybody, hope you're all doing really well. Got my cup of tea. Hang on. Light. Need light. It's funny, video is very much like photography. You need good light. So it's amazing how much difference there is when you have a little bit of light on your subject. Right, first of all, I just wanted to thank all of you for leaving comments in last week's fails video. Now, if you haven't seen that video, I'll leave a link up here for you. It's funny, you know, how many people have the same problems as everybody else. They're all kind of very similar, you know, to do with either not switching off the vibration reduction button or forgetting to return your ISO to a certain setting. I mean, we all make those mistakes, so it's quite funny to read the comments. So thank you ever so much for that. I really appreciate it. Now then, this week's video. I've got to be honest with you, right now I'm in a bit of a photographic slump. I'm not terribly motivated either, and the two kind of go hand in hand. The weather right now, well, actually the weather this past week has been quite good, and I should have probably gone out, but I've got quite a bit of work that I need to catch up on. I'm putting together a new website, and it all takes a lot of time. But of course, sitting here doing that means that I'm spending less time outside, and then it's hard to get motivated to go outside, especially when the days are getting shorter and the weather is starting to change. So since I'm in a slump, I decided, well, you know, why not talk about that and kind of go over some of the things that I like to do to try and get out of those slumps. And also, if you want to share and leave your comments below of what you like to do when, you know, you're not terribly motivated, or you have one of these kind of photographs look like crap kind of days. So one of the things that I really like to do is study the work of other artists. And I don't necessarily mean just photographers. I like looking at other photographers' work, and it doesn't have to be landscape work all the time. But I also like to look at the work of other artists in different mediums, painting, sculpture, that type of thing. I do draw inspiration from looking at a lot of those things. I haven't done it for a while, but now and then we like to go to a gallery, Karen and I, or we even have quite a bit of art around the house from other artists that we like as well. And it's great to hang that stuff up because you really get inspiration from other people's, you know, from their art. One of the other things I like to do is look at old images and images that I really like or that I feel that are successful, and that really helps me as well. It, I don't know, it kind of reaffirms or reassures me that yes, I am in a bit of a slump right now, but it will pass, and I know that, I mean, it could be weeks from now, it could be months from now, or it just could be a few days from now. I know that I'll go out and I'll start taking images, and I'll come away with images that I really like. So I don't worry about it too much. It's just, it's a bit of a drag, that's all. So what I'd like to do is show you some of my past successes, or the images that I really like. And I'll kind of go over what I like about them, perhaps give you some details about the location and so on. Perhaps if you're feeling in a bit of a slump yourself or not terribly inspired, then this will help you get inspired as well. All right, so without further delay, why don't I go through some of my images with you. Okay, so I'm really digging back into the archives here. This is an image that I took, it's probably about 15 years ago, maybe longer, and I remember the day vividly because I actually had to carry my youngest daughter out from this location, and it's about 7 miles, I believe. Some of you may be familiar with this spot. This is Ark Angel Falls, not too far from the subway in Zion National Park. And I actually recently uploaded this image to Instagram, so I thought I'd show it here because it has some qualities to it that I quite like. One of the main things that I really quite like about this image is that it's a very different perspective on this waterfall to the one that most of us usually take of this location. I used a 500mm lens on this composition. Now, usually we associate 500mm lenses with wildlife or sports, but in this case I was using it on a 4x5 film camera. And the reason why I was using such a long lens is I really wanted to pull that background in and kind of compress the whole scene. And with a 4x5 it's actually quite easy to do because you're able to change the focal plane of the camera. Now, most DSLRs, the focal plane is fixed, but with a 4x5 or a larger format, you can actually tilt the rear standard, which is where the film would go in, to kind of manipulate that focal plane. You can also tilt the lens plane as well. So with those two combined, you can get the foreground and the background in sharp focus with the lens more or less wide open. Now, you still need to stop down, but it's a really cool feature of large format cameras, and that's why a lot of people still use them today. The other neat thing about this waterfall is that in reality it's only about maybe 20 or 30 degrees in slope, but because I've compressed it so much with a long lens, it really looks like it's a short vertical cliff, when in fact it's quite a low angle waterfall. Okay, now I seem to be on a Zion National Park theme, so I think I'll stick with that, and also 4x5. What's really interesting to me when I look through my old 4x5 images is that my style of shooting has changed quite a bit. I used to shoot a lot of verticals in 4x5, probably because I liked the 4x5 format. And now that I shoot mostly 35mm, well, the way that I shoot seems to be more horizontals. Not really sure why that is. The other thing about large format is that it was a great learning tool for composition. It really forced me to slow down, take notice of my surroundings, and compose images in a careful, very deliberate way. And probably one of the main reasons behind that was not only because I had to slow right down because of all the settings and because everything's manual, but also film was quite expensive. It was about $5 or $6 per image. So every time I took an image, I wanted to make sure that I was taking a half decent image. Now, this photograph here has always been one of my favorites. This is in the Zion National Park high country. And the tree is one that I've visited on a number of occasions over the years. I'm not sure if it's still there. It is dead, but it looked like it'd been there for a long, long time. And every time I visited it, it was quite different. But on this occasion, I really wanted to emphasize those roots. So I got in really close with a wide-angle lens. And in this case, it was an 80mm XL lens. And I was able to really emphasize those roots in the foreground and then draw your eye into the rest of the scene. And the conifer up in the left corner was placed there on purpose to kind of try and fill that. There was a bit of a void there, so it kind of filled it in nicely. And of course the red rocks and all the textures in the roots and the rock there really add to the image. The other thing that I really like about images like this is that we have a really beautiful contrast in color. You'll notice that the roots of the tree are picking up a bit of the blue sky. This was in the shade on a bright blue sunny day, but it's picking up that ambient light from the sky, and of course then we have the red rock, so the contrast is really quite lovely. Okay, we've traveled a couple of 1,000 kilometers north of Zion now, up to Yoho National Park, or in this case Opaban Plateau in the Lake O'Hara area. Now, Lake O'Hara has to be, well, it is one of my favorite locations in Western Canada. It's just a fantastic place. The scenery, the wildlife, just the whole situation of the place. Lots of little tarns and beautiful larch in the fall. So it is a fantastic place for photography. Unfortunately, over the years, it's becoming more and more popular, like a lot of areas, and it's getting harder and harder to get into, especially in the busy season. Usually when I go in now, I hike in. I don't take the bus, and that tends to be a good time because not many people want to hike in. And on a number of occasions, I've had the whole area to myself, so it's still a great place to go. Okay, now this photograph here was not really a mistake, but it was a kind of a pleasant surprise, I guess. I took this quite a few years ago now with a 4x5 again, and I was on a trip with a fellow photographer named Michael Wheatley. Now, Michael and I had spent quite a few hours up on Opaben waiting for the light as usual, and it just wasn't happening. It was cold, windy. It didn't look like the weather was going to change for the best. So I started pottering around and trying to find compositions in the light that we did have. And I came across this one, and at the time I wasn't terribly excited about it, but when I got the film back, I just absolutely loved the composition. I loved the angle of view that I have on this waterfall here, and the trees in the background. And again, the reason why I've put it in this selection is that because I was using a 4x5, I was able to use a relatively long lens. In this case, it was a 200mm. So I was able to really emphasize that foreground, but also bring the background trees forward so they didn't look so small in the frame. That's the problem with wide-angle lenses, is that they're great for getting in close to foreground elements, but you really lose that background. Things start to fade away to nothing. Now, in recent years with digital photography, quite a few photographers now, they'll take multiple images with different focal lengths and then they'll blend them all together. A bit more of a traditional approach here. Okay, now I can't finish off this little slideshow without at least showing a few of my images from Mount Seymour Provincial Park. Now, any of you that have been following my work for any amount of time will know that I have a pretty nice collection of images from the local ski areas near Vancouver. Mount Seymour I've been going to for quite a few years now, and I've made a couple of videos of the area, and I'll leave a link up in the corner here. But these are some of my favorite 4x5 images. The thing that I really love about going up Mount Seymour is that the weather up there, well, first of all, it's very unpredictable, but with any coastal weather in British Columbia here, the snow is generally very heavy, and as a result, it just clings to everything. It's kind of a wet snow. And when you get that combination of a great snowstorm with a bit of a clearing spell after, you just get these magnificent conditions where you have the snow, it just plasters everything. The snow itself, actually, it almost feels like polystyrene. It's kind of a hard packed snow, and it's just kind of glued on like kind of like plaster on a wall. So it's very neat. Now, this final image I had to put in for photographic inspiration, because it's one of those images that I hadn't really planned on capturing. Some friends and I had hiked up to the summit of Mount Seymour, hoping to get the sunrise light on the snowy trees in the mountains here. But what we hadn't planned for was the full moon setting over to the west. And of course, as we got closer to the summit and saw the moon kind of hanging over the horizon line there, our footsteps kind of got quicker and quicker. And of course, when I got to the summit, I was frantically trying to set up my 4x5 camera before the moon set behind the horizon. The only problem with setting up a 4x5 with this type of image was that I needed a relatively long lens to get a decent sized moon in the picture. So I used a 300mm lens, but the problem with a 300mm is that because we have vertical trees and I wanted the foreground trees to be sharp and the moon, it's pretty hard to get everything in sharp focus, because as soon as you tilt the rear standard to change the focal plane, you'd get the bottom of the trees or the mid section of the trees sharp and the moon, but the tops of the trees would be out of focus. So I had to do a little bit of a compromise here. I did the best I could, but the middle tree isn't quite tack sharp, which is fine. I mean, at this size, you won't even notice, and at quite large prints, you barely notice it. The moon is sharp though, and my exposure was just under a second, so it's pushing it a little bit, but I was really happy to get this image because it was kind of an unplanned event. All right, I hope that gave you a little bit of inspiration. It certainly helped me a little bit, for now anyway. Hopefully by next week I will have a new video where I'm actually outside taking photographs, doing something a little bit more interesting than sitting behind my computer. Thanks ever so much for watching, and be sure to give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. And as always, if you enjoy the content of my other videos, be sure to subscribe. Thanks a lot, everybody, and I'll catch you hopefully next week. All right, bye-bye.